In Kettlewood, silence came like a sickness. It wasn't the quiet you find in the woods after snowfall, or the hush of a church when everyone holds their breath at once. No, this was heavier, dense. A silence that swallowed sound instead of holding it. One morning, the internet was gone. Every bar of service vanished from cell phones. Screens froze, then blinked out. At first, people assumed the power grid had hiccuped, that some storm had knocked something out along the ridge. But the lights still worked. The clocks still ticked. Refrigerators still hummed. Electricity flowed, but everything connected to the outside was severed. Satellite TV went dark. Radios found no stations, no news, no weather alerts, no emergency broadcasts, just silence. It was as if the world beyond the borders of Kettlewood had blinked out of existence overnight. Initially dismissed as a temporary glitch, the extended outage grew unsettling. By the third day, the persistent silence became unnaturally heavy, signifying a deeper problem. Claire, a longtime diner waitress, noticed a profound shift. Once bustling with the sounds of the griddle, truckers' jokes, teens on phones, and news chatter, the diner was now eerily quiet. TVs were off, phones blank, truckers hushed, and conversations sparse and nervous, as if fearing the silence itself. The quiet in the diner amplified every sound. On the fourth morning, Mr. Jensen, a solitary neighbor, entered looking pale and frail. His hands trembled around his coffee. He muttered to Claire, "I heard my name last night." Claire questioned, "Heard it where?" Jensen leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper as though he were confessing something terrible. "On the radio," he said, came through the static. "Said I'd die today." The words fell flat on the linoleum floor, and for a moment, silence swallowed them too. A couple of men at the counter forced out a laugh, the kind you give when you want to believe something isn't serious. Someone said maybe Jensen had too much whiskey before bed. Even Claire tried to smile, to brush it off. But the look in Jensen's eyes wasn't the kind you could fake. It was the look of a man who'd already made peace with something inevitable. That evening, Claire saw the flashing lights outside his house. An ambulance paramedics rushed inside. By the time they wheeled him out, the sheet was already drawn over his face. Heart attack. Exactly the way the static had promised. Word spread fast. By the next morning, people were dragging old radios out of basements, blowing dust off dials, fiddling with antennas. They wanted to test it, to prove it was just a coincidence, a fluke. Nothing more than a grieving old man who believed what he wanted to believe. But it wasn't. Each person heard something different. Some just whispers of names, others heard dates. Some heard how a teenage boy heard, September 14th, fire. That afternoon, his truck exploded at the gas station. The blast rattled windows across town. Panic gripped people. Some destroyed radios, others became fixated, unable to escape the pervasive static and the voices it brought. Claire tried to rationalize it as mass hysteria, avoiding radios and seeking silence. Yet, the static found her regardless of her efforts. On the fourth night, her own radio clicked on by itself. She hadn't touched it in years. It sat on a shelf in her kitchen, forgotten. But suddenly, the dial glowed faintly. A hiss of static filled the room, sharp and alive, like boiling water pouring into her ears. She froze, her chest tight. Then came the voice. Claire. It wasn't loud, but it cut through her like a blade. Her name, spoken in a voice that wasn't a voice, thin and endless, as though the static itself was shaping her syllables. Drowning. 3 days. Her stomach turned to ice. She ripped the cord from the wall, her hands trembling, the radio dying with a pop. But the silence didn't return. The voice didn't stop. She heard it in the hum of her refrigerator, beneath the buzzing neon sign outside the diner, in the wind rattling the trees outside her window. And late that night, lying in bed wide awake, she heard it in her own breath, each exhale shaping the word, as though her lungs belonged to something else. Drowning. The days after that were worse. Kettlewood began to unravel. People stayed indoors. Some starving, fearing poisoned food. Others left, never to return. At the diner, Claire observed the regulars transform. Once boisterous men now sat silently, sipping coffee. Women prayed, clutching crosses. Teenagers huddled, sharing stories of what the static had revealed to their friends. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the waiting. Kettlewood knew the whispers foretold death. Some quick, others slow. Each sunrise brought the dread of another's time ending. Claire saw her friend Emily one morning. Emily had always been bright, sharp-witted, the kind of person who filled the room with noise. But now, she sat alone at the counter, hands folded around a cold cup of coffee, her lips moving soundlessly. Claire leaned in, whispering her name. Emily didn't answer. She just kept moving her lips. Oberon d'Aubert. And then Claire realized what she was saying, not words of her own. She was repeating the whispers, every phrase, every breath, like a prayer. The static had gotten into her. The town vibrated with a hidden voice, inescapable and everywhere. Claire fought it, but resistance only amplified it. She unplugged appliances and buried her radio, but the voices persisted. One night, she heard rushing water inside herself. Panicked, she heard the voice whisper, 3 days. She pressed her palms to her ears until her head throbbed, but the words seeped through her bones. She thought of Jensen, of the boy at the gas station, of Emily mumbling like a broken machine. 3 days. The countdown wrapped around her like chains. She tried to keep busy. She scrubbed the diner until her hands cracked and bled. She cleaned cupboards she hadn't opened in years. She walked the empty streets just to feel movement, to feel human. But everywhere she went, she saw the same fear. People clutching radios to their chests like oracles, waiting for their turn. Others staring blankly, their whispers filling the air in hushed chorus. Children wept into their parents' shoulders, asking if the static would find them too. No one had answers. By the second night, Claire stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw water rushing up her walls, flooding her lungs. She felt it pressing down on her chest, filling her throat, drowning her from the inside out. She stayed awake, pacing the house, ears ringing with static that wasn't there. The third night came. She sat alone in her dark kitchen, a single lamp burning. She didn't eat. She didn't drink. She just waited, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles went white. Then it happened. Every radio in town clicked on at once. The sound poured through walls, through windows, through the night air itself. It wasn't faint anymore. The static roared, deafening, layered on itself 100 times over. It filled every room, every street. Dead televisions sparked to life. Phones without batteries hummed with vibration. Broken radios crackled from trash bins. And then came the voice. Not as a whisper this time. Not faint or fragile. It was a command. Your turn. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, hands clamped over her ears. But it didn't matter. The voice wasn't outside anymore. Ida was in seat. The sound of rushing water filled the room. She heard it splashing across the floor, gurgling through her walls. She smelled it moldy, stagnant, the stench of a lakebed untouched for decades. Her lungs locked. She couldn't breathe. Her mouth opened, gasping for air that wasn't there, pulling in water that didn't exist. The static surged, screaming through her head until her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was her kitchen light flickering, the bulb sputtering like it was about to burst. The floor buckled beneath her, and in the darkness, she fell. Then, silence. Across Kettlewood, every radio died in unison. The televisions went black. Phones dropped silent. For a moment, the town held its breath, waiting. And then, as one, the voices slipped into the empty air. "You can't turn it off!" The whisper echoed, bouncing off walls, threading through houses, crawling into every ear. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. But Kettlewood knew the truth. The silence wasn't silence anymore, and it never would be again. Kettlewood was shattered by Jensen's death and the gas station incident. The small town grieved, and the static's whispers felt like constant premonitions. By the 5th day, churches overflowed. But prayers for silence were futile. Even there, the static pressed in, spontaneously activating radios and car stereos, driving congregants to tears. It wasn't just prophecy anymore. It was presence. Claire watched it break people she had known her whole life. After 30 years, Mrs. Alden locked her flower shop doors one morning. Claire saw the devastation, smashed vases, torn bouquets, petals scattered. That night, Mrs. Alden was found dead in her greenhouse, her radio still on. At the grocery store, a mother clutched her daughter who cried out, saying the static had whispered her name. The mother screamed at anyone who approached, protecting her child from the marked town. Others willingly gathered at dusk by the water tower, holding radios aloft. They listened, eyes wide, as if the static were a preacher. Some repeated what they heard, their voices blending into a chant, until the town seemed to breathe in unison with the static. Claire tried to pretend she wasn't part of it. She worked longer hours at the diner, cleaning tables that no one sat at, brewing coffee that no one drank. It was easier to keep her hands busy than to think about the words that had been spoken to her. Drowning. 3 days. She grew acutely sensitive to time, sound, and water. Shunning her home's water, she sealed her bathtub, yet internal whispers continued. Nightmares of dark lakes and unseen hands pulling her under left her gasping awake. She tried to tell herself it was only fear, but then she remembered Jensen, the boy, Mrs. Alden, and all the rest. Fear didn't kill them. The static did. The night after hearing her name, she walked deserted Main Street for clarity. Store windows were dark, street lights buzzed, and distant homes showed flickering blue radio glows. At the corner, she saw Harold Green, the mechanic, holding his radio aloft, eyes fixed on the sky, lips moving. Claire Kayed. But he didn't respond. She stepped closer. He repeated every word, his voice trembling, eyes wet, even as his lips cracked and bled. She fled. By the third night, her house felt alien, claimed by whispers. The refrigerator hummed her name, pipes groaned, and the buried radio haunted her dreams. She sat in her kitchen with every light off, a single candle flickering. Her heart raced so hard, she thought it might split her chest open. She wanted to believe she still had a choice, that she could fight it, but she knew better, because at that moment, every radio in Kettlewood clicked on at once. The sound rose like a tide, filling every wall, every corner. It wasn't faint anymore. It was a roar, 1,000 voices stacked on top of each other, all screaming through the same narrow tunnel. Then came the command, "Your turn." Claire's breath shattered. She stumbled back, covering her ears. But the sound was inside her. It wasn't in the room, it was in her bones. The rushing water came next. Louder than any storm, she smelled it, thick and foul, filling the air until her lungs begged for oxygen. She gasped, but only water poured in, choking her, flooding her throat, drowning her from the inside. The candle sputtered out. The kitchen light flickered, humming like a trapped insect. The floor gave way beneath her, and she fell into blackness. Then, silence. Across Kettlewood, the radios all died together. The televisions went blank. The phones stilled. For a heartbeat, the town was quiet again. The kind of quiet people used to know before the static. And then, in perfect unison, every voice returned. Not as whispers this time, but as one, "You can't turn it off." The words slipped into the air like smoke, seeping into walls, settling into lungs. The town froze, listening, and when the phrase faded, they knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting, and Kettlewood would never hear silence again.